Hi, and welcome back to Freedom Rocks. I'm here interviewing Robin Wilt, who is the Democratic candidate for State Senate in the 56th District. Thank you for joining us, Robin.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So, let's see. I've asked you quite a variety of questions, so I may have to start making some up off the top of my head here.
A little bit.
But let's see. What do you feel about New York's recent passage of the no-fault divorce law? Do you think that adults have the right to get divorced because they want to, or should they provide a reason to the state?
This is another many-layered issue. I think the fault divorce laws were in place because there is a certain sanctity to the institution of marriage. And I know that in terms of protections for women, this was a dicey area. As we know, women are often not the main breadwinners in the marital estate, and the fault divorce laws were a protection to them. Now, I think if we had, if we split the assets equitably, then there's not a problem for women in terms of no-fault divorce. But without that equitable distribution of assets, I do think it poses a problem for women. Okay.
I'm sure you're familiar with the dysfunction in the state legislature.
Yes.
Over the past year, and actually going back quite a number of years. Since you're going to the state senate, which is kind of like the battleground there, what would you do to promote more bipartisan cooperation, or just to try to get that chamber to do its job?
Right. I think if we focus on policy that is going to help our constituents, help everyday working families, address the needs of the community, as opposed to engage in political horse trading where we're bartering between special interest groups, we will end up with more sound legislation. I think that if you keep focus on the goal of the legislation and don't try to make deals with entities based on party affiliation or whatnot, you end up with better legislation.
Okay. Do you believe that cigarette taxes are too high in New York State?
I do believe that cigarette taxes are quite high. You know, again, I think our budget priorities were somewhat misplaced this session. So again, in the system of bartering and legislative horse trading that occurred, we ended up with bad policy. If you're, you know, the cigarette tax increase came as a result of trying to find revenue wherever you could find it, no matter how regressive it was, no matter whether it made sense for everyday working families. And again, I think that there were revenue sources that were ignored due to special interest money that's in politics that you know, reflect the fact that we have a broken democratic system right now.
Okay. Now, recently, the collection of cigarette taxes by Native Americans has been in the news.
Yes.
Gubernatorial candidate Carl Palladino has said that we should actually set up a blockade around like all of the entrances and exits to the reservations.
Palladino has a lot of interesting ideas.
Yeah, and not let anybody in or out until they start collecting the taxes. do you believe that the, not necessarily specifically a blockade, do you believe that they should be required to collect taxes, or that the current system of requiring people to voluntarily report it on their tax returns should be maintained?
Well, I certainly think a blockade is extreme. Obviously, we know what our legacy is with regard to Native Americans, and Native American nations are somewhat autonomous. And so when you're dealing with that situation, you can't necessarily, you have existing legislation in place that you need to legislate around. And so I don't know that we could enforce a blockade of any sort. And right now the voluntary system is working.
Okay. This is maybe more of a federal question, but it ties in because New York State has to accept Native American documents. So they're their own nation, they issue their own passports, and things of that nature. And recently, Native American teams going to other countries have been denied entry to those countries because their passports are not accepted, due to the heightened security regarding terrorism. But on a statewide basis, do you believe that New York State should accept things like passports or licenses or permits, not driver's licenses, they don't issue those, but in general, should they accept the paperwork of the Native American tribes as equivalent to the same sort of paperwork and documents that New York State would issue to
I think it certainly depends on what type of paperwork we're talking about. You named some examples. Are you talking about something in particular, or talking about passports in particular? Because I don't think there's an issue there.
Yeah, not passports in particular. There are such things as supporting documentation, like birth certificates if you want to apply for state social services. I'm not aware that that's been an issue, but we're on the topic of Native Americans, and we're almost out of time. And so we have about 30 seconds, so if you want to issue a 30-second closing statement, you may go ahead.
Well, again, I want to thank you so much for having me today. It's been a pleasure discussing issues with you, and I look forward to entering the Senate and implementing common sense policy for everyday working families.
Okay, thank you, Robin. This has been Freedom Rocks. Thank you for joining us.